we're going to have some things specifically to share with you today to make sure that you can prepare your best for the oncoming potential recession. Before we get started, though, let's talk a little about GroundTruth. We're an advertising company that turns real-world behavior into marketing that delivers business results. What that really means is we're a company that uses real-world signals, things like location and credit card data, and other pieces of real-world behavior that let us build advertising audiences that you can leverage to market against your target audiences. And ultimately, given the fact we're using real-world signals, we can actually measure whether or not you had a successful interaction with that person, whether they, for example, showed up to your business. So it's really important for us to use these real-world signals so we can build great audiences, but also measure the impact of what's happening in your marketing. I'm going to speak a bit throughout the presentation on some of the specific items that we use to use this real-world behavior to actually drive real results and that you might be able to leverage in your own marketing. Let's do some basic housekeeping here before we jump in. Please, we encourage you to use the chat, ask questions as you have them throughout the session. You should see a chat and a poll function. Please use them. You are muted, but that chat function is going to let you communicate with us directly and ultimately in the panel communicate. You should submit your questions anytime you have one. There's no reason to wait until the end. Just go ahead and pop something in the Q&A and share your feedback through the poll. If you have follow-up questions, you can reach out to GroundTruth. @expert@groundtruth.com is our email address, but you can use any of the contacts you have at GroundTruth to actually reach out and talk to us today. I mentioned there is going to be a panel today, so I'm going to go ahead and walk through our presentation on using media to thrive in a recession, and then we have a panel discussion with some invited speakers that will be moderated by Rachel at GroundTruth. So let's go ahead and jump into the content. It's funny because a lot of brands focus a lot of time and attention during a recession on what are they going to do to survive. And it seems like there's a handful of brands that usually come out of the back end much, much stronger. This is an example. It's a quote from Sam Walton from Walmart. But this has been true in every recession cycle. There are companies that walk out of the other side with more market share, with a better positioning in market, with more customers. They may not see giant gains within the recession, but shortly after, oftentimes there's a pretty big shift. And it's oftentimes chalked up to the actions that companies take within that recessionary period, and oftentimes the marketing actions they take during those recessionary periods. And there's some very basic things that these companies tend to follow. Let's break down those things that people tend to do in recessions and tend to see benefit in. Number one, and I'll dig into each of these a little bit more, they tend to not focus as much on internal marketing vanity metrics. They tend to focus on P&L metrics, things that on the back end that your board and CFO can agree to are concretely affecting the business. It's sort of like, when things are rough, you call the BS out. You just focus fundamentally on the things that have a direct attribution to your business growth. That sounds really simple and sounds like everybody probably does it already, but the truth is a lot of marketing departments and agencies focus on things like pure efficiencies. Even things like ROAS is technically an efficiency model and not a return model, on its face. So focusing on the metrics that have a more serious impact can be very beneficial. I'll dig into that more in a second. Another specific tactic that tends to be employed is people tend to invest brand building dollars and marketing dollars during that recessionary period. There's been a bunch of studies, and I'll walk through a few of them, kind of the superficial readings of them anyways, that show when you put money in market, you gain market share on the back end of that recession much, much more quickly. So actually continuing to invest in marketing, especially in marketing that directly connects to the business benefits that you see, those real attributable revenue and traffic and check goals that you have, tends to give you a much better result coming out of that recession. So investing during the recession tends to give you a much better result on the back end of the recession. And the last piece that I'm going to spend some time talking about is focusing on storytelling. Oftentimes during a recession, because the sort of BS falls away, because priorities get very clear in the business, it can be really hard to sell in the idea that marketing is worthwhile, that it's worth investing now, that you are affecting the business in a positive way. And it's actually hard to tell the story to your customer that you're worthwhile, you're worth considering when things are tight, when they're not sure if they can actually swing putting some cash into whatever your product or service is. So focusing your attention on storytelling, and I'll give you some specific examples of this, tends to result in both internally more success in marketing, and then on the back end, success in how you come out of the recession with customers. So let's dig into dropping the vanity metrics first. There's nothing wrong with an impression, but impressions are kind of garbage if you ask a CFO, if you ask a board. It's oftentimes marketing metrics like impressions, like video completion rates, even click-through rates. These metrics that are the intermediary metrics, the metrics that you feel have correlation to results, that get questioned during these times. A very real example from my past, I've run marketing for several large publicly traded companies. And one company I was at, they solidly believe that there was a certain TRP level required on TV weekly to see sales stay steady or increase. And in some cases, you can find correlations, in reach in certain vehicles or mediums to find that correlation between growth. But at the point I was being told this, and it was being told to me that don't touch this metric, don't mess with that 250 TRP number, we were on year 9 of decline as a company. So there was no real correlation. There was just emotional connection between this level of TV spend back in the day and business results. So going past impressions and to actual metrics. So if you can do, for example, a pre-post net of control study, and you can see lift applied when media is in one market and media is not in a control market, that's meaningful for a CFO. If you can ultimately tie your marketing to things like traffic, actual people showing up in the business. Franchisees tell me all the time, all I care about is butts and seats, make people show up. So fundamentally, you can use mediums to show your attribution of marketing dollar goes in, traffic or revenue or check growth comes out the other side. You will see a dramatic shift in the way you're perceived in your organization. And I don't say that just to say, I had personal anecdotes or I know CMOs or have friends that do this. There's hundreds of case studies out there of people applying this. And I'll just share a couple with you specifically from GroundTruth. We have a CPG brand that I can't name, unfortunately, that they attribute 800,000 visits and a 24-point bump in using specific audiences that utilize location and other real-world behaviors to drive in individual people into Walmart to buy their product. They use previous Walmart shoppers as a component here. Obviously, it's someone who frequents that location. They looked in the category that they were looking to draw in. They looked in the category that were high spenders that tended to buy on a more regular basis, like parents. And then we looked specifically at past purchases of people who were already comfortable with the brand, pushing the product to this individual market, saw a dramatic lift. We have cases like this all the time with the right audience defined and with the right media served to that audience. You can then directly attribute a lift on the back end to that advertising. When you go into your board meeting or into your meeting with your client or meeting with your CMO or whoever it is you're reporting into, and you can show them in a platform there are physical visits occurring, it is a total game changer in the way you can talk about your marketing, rather than talk about those intermediate metrics or those potentially correlated metrics that we spoke about before. Another example, this is specifically for Toyota, using neighborhood targeting. So people likely to buy a Toyota for this particular group of dealerships. And our location data that allows you to look at visitation patterns. My family just bought a car. You do certain things, especially location-based things and internet-based things, to indicate you're interested in buying a car. And by the dealerships you drive by or pull into, by the physical cars you're looking at, you're giving signals that then you can build audiences from in the right media platforms. So being able to actually build those audiences out and then deliver the right ads to the right people at the right time to encourage a visit is a very strong indicator of where you'll get sales. And here we had 240 car sales attributed, ballpark 10-ish $1,000 per transaction there. So this is a significant return on that media investment that they can attribute directly back to focusing on the specifics that drive the business versus broader vanity metrics. Now, if you would have just run a campaign like this using traditional media and you would have make assumptions about reach driving sales, you would not have the kind of correlation here to attribute your marketing dollars and say, this is the number of transactions we actually saw happen because of these behaviors. Not to say you do use a medium like GroundTruth or whoever in isolation. You can use it as part of an overall plan, but having these metrics dramatically improves your ability to sell in the importance of marketing in your organization and the need to continue to invest in marketing and in media in your organization. Second topic we want to spend a minute talking about is investing now to win later. And there are really some components here to investing now to win later to consider. One is you can build brand awareness actually much more efficiently within a recessionary window. And the main reason for that is advertising dollars tend to get more accessible. Not more accessible, more reasonable. Your costs tend to decline, and inventory of really good premium media tends to be more available. So you can build brand awareness using kind of the opening that occurs during a recessionary period. Now, again, I would not focus on brand awareness as the primary metric you deliver internally to talk about how you're going to grow the business. So you got to be a bit careful there that you're not using brand awareness as your primary metric. You want to talk about traffic or check or visits to your primary assets, whatever those final metrics are. But we know that if you are especially fighting in a competitive space for market share, building brand awareness can be a very effective tool in the long run. So by actually spending when the demand and supply are off because it's a recessionary period, you can see a significant benefit in the actual amount of advertising you can buy and the nature of that advertising, the premium nature of that advertising. And the other thing that tends to happen is because people are cutting back, you can take market share. I've experienced this myself in brands during recessionary periods where when I pulse heavier runs of advertising, knowing that I have a few competitors that are letting their foot off the gas because the market is in a rough shape, I immediately see an uptick of market share as the media is running. And normally there's a huge delay between your market share and your media running, but it happens much faster during these periods because it's quieter in market among your competitive set. So being out of sight, we know, is being out of mind, and you can gain market share. Again, market share is one of those metrics that if you talk about it internally, people tend to relate to that. They tend to understand the value of having more market share and having more kind of share of mind for your target. There are hundreds of case studies out there of brands that have done serious work during recessionary periods and seen a significant benefit from that in market share and in growth. Here's a handful of older ones. There's a great Harvard Business Review article on this. There's a couple great Forbes articles on it. There's all sorts of studies out there that clearly dictate when a brand pushes during a recession, they see a benefit. Some specifics here, Toyota really established itself during a recessionary period. It's very rare that can occur for an entrant brand, but they did so by running advertising when the market was a bit quieter. McDonald's saw some recession much weaker than your competitors who choose not to. Again, Amazon credits, and parts of their model credits the Great Recession that happened in 2009 to their drive. And again, there are dozens and dozens of studies on this. Nielsen's got a great piece that breaks down what tends to happen during recessionary cycles. They're crediting the bulk of the benefit to the savings in ads. So basically, you can run more media. And because you can run more media in the right spots and with premium inventory, you can tend to see a better result. But across the board, it's very consistent that fundamentally when you spend during a recessionary period, you see growth. This first bullet here, half of brands that increased media during the last recession saw ROI net improvements. And seeing an ROI improvement during a recession is pretty impressive in and of itself. A 17% rise versus a loss of 15% of business for companies that spent versus those who cut back. And the messages actually tend to perform better during a recessionary period. Again, mostly because it's quieter, mostly because most people are cutting back. So I would suggest arm yourself with some of this data or data like this that lets you make the argument that it's worthwhile spending. You got to come up with your metrics first that are real business metrics. So you'll get support in, yes, we all want to go traffic or grow check or whatever that metric is that you're pushing. But then you can come in with research that says companies like these guys have found benefit in investing during these periods. The last component I would suggest you really look hard at is storytelling. And there's two components really of storytelling here that I would speak to. One is an internal component, both in the vanity metrics, but also in showing that your marketing is smart. When there's pressure on your marketing, the tendency is just to say, well, what can you cut? Versus make an argument for the value of your marketing. And I have personally found that arguing that your marketing is clever, is smart, is reaching the right people, ultimately delivers on real business metrics, is a huge influence on the effect of your ability to internally sell in. If you're using a tool like GroundTruth and it gives you specific numbers on what you'll actually see in visits or reach, in the specifics that align to the personas that internally you've defined, in the specifics that let you tell a story saying, right now people aren't spending here, but they're spending here. We see this category is growing, and we can focus on people that would love our product, love our service, and are spending in that area. This creates a narrative internally that says marketing is being smart with their dollars. Marketing is focusing on a very likely to convert customer versus spending money, randomly on broad reach. So one huge suggestion I have is leverage your partners, leverage the insights they have, leverage the data they have, leverage their ability to help you weave a narrative that says we're spending smart and we're going to see a result from this spend because it's so smart. It's also a bigger opportunity than just your media marketing plan telling that story. Brands often will establish their broader brand narrative during times of recovery, either in recessionary recovery or in their own cycle of recovery. I love this story from Domino's, and I'm the former CMO of Papa John, so I have a sore spot, and I have a friend who's the CMO of Donato's and another friend who's CMO of Little Caesars. So I'm a huge fan of the pizza category because it's such a commoditized space and it's so aggressively marketed. In this case, Domino's established their positioning as a tech company, a distribution company, rather than primarily a pizza company during a recessionary period, and then ultimately established that during their own period of recovery. So finding that narrative that's broader, that will reflect with consumers, that will make consumers interested in times when they're making decisions in different ways because of a recessionary period, can be critical in your long-term success. What I'm saying is use it as an opportunity. Use the recession as an opportunity to make sure you're telling your brand story appropriately, and then buy media that's both clever and more efficient, given the recession, to distribute that story so you get credit for the story. Another example here I'll give you is in electric cars. It's kind of, I think, going to happen during this recessionary period. There's already some establishing occurring, but a $50 or $60 or $70,000 electric car is probably not on someone's mind during a recessionary period. But what these companies are doing is establishing a baseline. They're setting up the future. So when they recover, when the recovery begins to occur, folks like GM and Ford can step in and actually get credit for having this thing that you dreamed about during the recession, and now you can afford coming out of a recession as things recover. So I think you're going to see it in real time with electric cars right now. As somebody I've driven an electric car for a while. I love electric cars. They are definitely bleeding edge technology for a lot of people. But I think during this recessionary period, as people consider, what am I going to do? I'm going to survive on my car that's kind of limping along through this period. But as soon as I come out, I want something new and something interesting and maybe something efficient. And an electric car certainly is that. So I think what's happening right now is we're witnessing storytelling in electric cars, but use this as your own moment, as your own brand moment to establish a narrative going forward that lets you capture that market share as soon as people get back into the habit of spending again. So these are the three basic suggestions that we would make to you. Drop those vanity metrics, focus on things with tangible results that you can, with a straight face, celebrate with your CFO and with your board and the others that are telling you to cut the garbage, and just focus on what works. So drop the vanity metrics, focus on real metrics like traffic to your stores, like sales, like check growth, things that are more real and that you can then correlate to media activities so you can tell a good story about those real metrics, those real business metrics. Invest if you can now, and make the argument internally that we can gain market share during this slower period and do so more efficiently, because media is more efficient during a recessionary period. And we can get better inventory in media during this period, which will let us come out of this much, much stronger and even maybe steal market share during the recessionary period, which is what tends to happen. Then the final thing is really do focus on storytelling, both internally, so you can make a case that what you're doing is smart, what you're doing will be effective, what you're doing will help you get out of the recession, the recessionary period for your own company and ultimately for the country. And also focus on telling your brand story in a way that is impactful, because consumers are more apt to listen and are prepping their wish list for the future during recessionary periods. And if you can be on that wish list, as soon as the recovery begins, you might be one of the first purchases that they go to. So focus on storytelling. That's what I had for you today, as far as what to do to use media to your advantage during a recessionary period. We're now going to move over to a discussion with Rachel and a bunch of guests that we brought along to talk about how agencies are planning in 2023. So Rachel, ready when you are.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Brandon. That was awesome. I am trying to get my video on, but for some reason, it's not letting me. Okay, here we go. All right, sorry about that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. That was awesome. I feel like what kind of stood out to me a lot was the businesses that stop advertising during recession, they lose about 15% of market share, but the businesses that continue on gain about 17%. That to me was huge. So really cool to see, but awesome. All right, so we will move into our panel discussion. I'm really excited to have everybody here. Thank you all so much for joining. My name is Rachel Nobles. I am a senior account executive on the platform team here with GroundTruth, and I have the true pleasure of working with all of our panelists that you see here in some form or fashion. So we're going to get into a panel discussion where I'm going to be asking questions, and we're going to hear from them on all different types of perspectives that are relevant to this topic. And it's going to be amazing. So before we kick off and get into the questions, let's have everybody introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask everybody to please just share a bit about your current role and your focus, along with the experience that got you all here today. So Kim, if it's okay, we will start with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hey, I am Kim Davis. I am a business lead at Assembly Global. We are a performance first media agency globally. I lead a team out of Baltimore, Maryland, and currently, across basically all verticals, B2B, B2C, D2C, from tech to entertainment, hotel, casino, malls, really across the board. And happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Athena, how about you go next?
All right, I'm Athena Gibson, and I'm the COO of Gulf Coast Web. We provide white labeled fulfillment services for broadcast companies. So we get to work with all types of verticals across the United States, everywhere from small businesses to large corporations. So we fulfill everything from the digital strategies. We help with proposals and strategy and all of that fun stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Patrick, if you can go now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. So my name is Patrick Blanchard. I'm VP of Interactive Marketing for Trulio. We are a brand experience, digital marketing, and technology transformation agency. That's just a really witty way of saying that we run digital marketing campaigns, creative, web design and development, application development for a lot of Fortune 500 companies, from airlines to banks, down to building products manufacturers and telecom, and we fulfill needs for the SMB market as well. Been doing it a long time, and really happy to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to spend the next about 20 minutes or so going through our questions and hearing from these experts that we have on our panel. We'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. So just another plug before we get into the questions. As we go, if anybody wants to ask any questions, whether it be to Brandon, our CMO, or anybody on our panel, please use the Q&A function, and we will answer all the questions at the end. So we will get into our first question. So all of your agencies serve clients across a wide array of industries. What have been some of the greatest learnings in 2022 as we head into the end of the year? And are there any big shifts expected that you see for 2023 within any of those verticals? Patrick, would you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. That's fine.
Fine.
A big industry that we service is, like I said earlier, building products, and we leverage GroundTruth technology to drive in-store dealer visits. And coming out of the pandemic, there was a supply and demand shift that occurred where they were manufacturing less product and exterior cladding and industries like, product categories like that than they could produce. So it was a little bit of a weird marketing pivot that we had to make. And then now that is beginning to shift again, where now there's enough product, and with obvious issues like the housing market coming down, softening a little bit, and choices in exterior cladding, we're finding that we have product. And so we are beginning to make some pivots in our strategy when it comes to everything from paid search to location-based marketing tactics that will hopefully fill that gap just a little bit. So that's one that I can call out in particular. The other one is obviously, and I know Rachel, you and I've talked about this, is we service a large number of veterinary clinics around the Southeast, like from Texas to North Carolina down to South Florida and everywhere in between. And during the downturn, well, it wasn't a downturn, actually, the pandemic, I guess is what we call it. We found that location-based marketing was amazing because kill shelters and animal shelters were at all-time low populations. People were adopting pets during that time because they were all stuck at home. And what we found is the increase in need for veterinary care went up. And then looking at things like the balance between, 51% of the population of households having at least one pet, and 40% of the pet parents that bring their pet in do not have a general practice vet, has done wonderful things for after hours and weekend alternatives to veterinary care, as well as emergency vet care. And so watching those things shift and then having to make sure we stay ahead of it from a marketing perspective has been really interesting. So those are just two examples out of many, but.
Cool. I feel like those are two industries that have had a big impact since 2020 and COVID, and then are continuously, still you're always having to adjust and kind of make changes there. So that's really cool to hear.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, Athena, what about you? So as far as, your greatest learnings in 2022, and then any big shifts expected with any specific verticals that you guys focus on?
I would say that one of the biggest lessons that I learned this year was that businesses are having a really hard time with recruitment across using traditional methods like posting on job boards. Before, you used to be able to post a job on Indeed and then the applicants would come to them. But those traditional ways are not working anymore. So we were able to utilize GroundTruth to put messages in front of potential audiences who may not even have been looking for a job at the moment, but who possess the skills for the job. And so we're proactively being able to put the message in front of them, and we're finding huge successes with that, from small businesses to large manufacturing companies.
Awesome.
And I think that in 2023, we're going to see more of these companies that traditionally don't use advertising use these mediums for recruitment.
We're using it the same way. That's a great point.
Yeah, on the platform itself, even we've seen a huge uptick in people using it in a little bit more of a creative way than traditional, by recruitment, because it's just people are figuring out ways to get in front of applicants or maybe passive applicants that they can't reach otherwise. So that's a great example as well. Kim, I'd love to hear from you, greatest learnings 2022, and then any big shifts that you guys expect to see within your current focus verticals for 2023 as well.
Yeah, I think like the biggest learning we can all take out from the last, 2 years, right, is be nimble, be agile, keep on your toes. It's been an ever-changing vertical or landscape, really, across the board. And I think that that's just going to continue, especially through the next 24 months, for sure. And I think across the board, I think to Patrick's point, home builders, like new home builders, we went from having no inventory to an abundance, and not even just an abundance right now, but looking towards 23 and 24, we know that we've started building massively, or our clients have, during a high demand, and looking forward to what that's going to look like in terms of supply demand over the next 12 to 24 months, I think is going to be interesting, right? Especially with interest rates fluctuating. And then again, just staying nimble and agile. I know what we see a lot of our clients, especially if they are on the more conservative side, wanting to push budgets more into lower funnel. But I think, Brandon, to your point, invest now to win later that's the key right now, and making sure that we are having those strategic conversations with our clients ahead of making any large shifts in their planning, so that we don't leave them at a lower end coming out of a possible recession.
Just to build on that for a second, who would have thought that, serious budgets would move towards things like recruiting, right? And shift so hard within individual companies based on inventory needs, as they, we can't sell anything. People, if they come to us, if you bring us customers, we can't sell anything to them. And all of a sudden, oh my God, our warehouses are full. Let's fix this problem. So I think actually that last point kind of rounds up all the points pretty nicely. And you got to be on your toes. You got to be agile.
Yeah.
You have to, the days of buying. I mean, I vividly remember back in the early 2000s, you would commit 80+% of your budget in upfront and lock it in at a big company. And you had no flexibility on 80% of your spend because you were just angling for efficiency. It was always about, reach that was cheap. And the second you get a curveball thrown at you in the middle of the year, you're in trouble because you just don't have those dollars anymore, or you're breaking commitments to partners, which is terrible. So, being agile is critical. Great points.
And, I just saw this question pop in. Sorry, Rachel, I just wanted to make a comment on this. The question was, as far as recruitment, are you targeting audiences based on skill sets alongside targeting those looking for employment? And Athena will probably have a great comment on this too. One thing that we've done in building products, manufacturing and things like that, where they're trying to add a third shift to keep up with that supply and demand. How do we target those people? Well, the first thing is the tool and the targeting is only as good as the creative that's being delivered. So what are we saying in our ad? And what are we putting in front of a potential new hire that's going to provide the power of persuasion to get them to click that ad, fill out that form, or click that HR person's phone number on the landing page? And what we found was that if we put a good piece of creative that they could identify with. So if they're in Milwaukee and they're trying to, load up a third shift in some distribution warehouse, our tactics behind that outside of the creative is going to be other distribution warehouses, other, fulfillment centers, other manufacturing facilities. And we're going to just basically run blueprint them and run a geo targeting campaign on them based on proximity of maybe the facility. And then what we found out on occasions is while we're doing all that, they come to us and they go, we're needing CDL drivers too. Like we don't have enough truck drivers. So then it's like, okay, long haul truck stops, hotels with 53-foot trailer parking capability. And we start building it out. And so a lot of what we do there is first party ground truth based targeting, but it's also just good old fashioned blueprinting too. And then setting up those ad groups separately so that we can actually see how effective each one is based on who it is we're trying to target. And then watching it constantly to make sure that we're making any strategic shifts. And then being that there's not really, we've set up conversion zones like at the place where the person would interview or at the facility where they could potentially show up. But we also double down with UTM parameters and destination URLs to track, did they fill out a form? Did they click to call? And so that's kind of from a strategic perspective, how we manage that type of thing. And I know there's probably other comments on this panel, but I just wanted to make sure that question was addressed because it's pretty important.
Right. So as far as we have a multifaceted campaign whenever we're doing any type of recruitment. So we have a pretty good mixture. We'll use like SEM for more of the targeted, looking for the specific jobs. But we usually geofence areas that are similar. So like we have a major manufacturing company. So we geofence all of the competitor manufacturing companies around. And the thought process behind this is that those people who are working at those manufacturing companies, they possess the skills that they need, that they're looking for our company. So what we do is we put that message in front of them. We tell them we have day one benefits, we offer job sign-on bonuses, and we put the pay on the creative as to what Patrick was saying about how it's very, very important, the message that you're putting in front of these people, because you only have a few seconds to make an impression. Right. And we hope that it's going to just take one day for your supervisor just yelling at you in front of your team too many times. One day that your coworkers called out so many times and you're covering their shift for you to say, you know what, I saw that job offering and I'm going to look at it. And a really fun observation that we've seen when we look at these reports is that more people are clicking while they're physically in the fences for recruitment than when they're outside of the fences. So they're at work looking at these apply now ads, clicking on these ads, looking at new jobs while they're currently at work. So
as the misery is happening, you're looking
right.
Exactly.
Well, it's all top of mind. That honestly translated perfectly into a question I was going to ask, which was, how do you ensure, that you're getting a compelling message to the right audience? I think Patrick and Athena, you both shared amazing examples for recruitment. Do any of you, Kim or anybody, have any examples of other ways that you're getting kind of compelling messages out to the right audience across other industries that you'd like to share?
I actually think that the examples that Patrick and Athena both used are multi-use, right? It's hyper-targeting. It's making sure that we are able to distinguish who our audience is at the time that we're relaying the message so that the message can be customized and specific to them. I think Patrick, even last time we spoke, I think you brought up an example, maybe it was Pepsi, but like the specific message of like at the long haul warehouses and stuff actually putting out there, like you could be home with your family right now. But like that works in every vertical, making sure that we are finding the people where they are, where they're most likely to consume and act upon our message. That's the key, hyper targeting.
And one thing and I'm glad you remembered that example, because I wish I could take credit for that campaign. I absolutely cannot. I was just told about it. But one thing that Rachel and I've been working on actually in the last week is there's an Americana music festival going on that, coming out of the pandemic, so many artists, like musical talents, hit the road and just began to tour relentlessly because they'd been pinned up writing new material and recording and all of that for 2 years. And all of a sudden they were hitting the road. So like I live right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So 7 nights a week, I can pick 5 acts that I could want to go see. And I'm within driving distance to go see those shows. Well, what we found is with some of the festivals, they're having a hard time selling tickets. And the argument is that people are going and seeing shows locally. And so you put all the acts that they like that fall under one category of entertainment in one festival location, and they've already seen 4 of them. Why would they pay a premium to go to a vacation spot on the coast of Florida and go watch these shows? So it's something that we started peeling back the layers of. And we're using GroundTruth, for instance, for this campaign, and we're using a combination of targeting, first party segmentation, and live ramp audiences. So get this, we were able to determine that there are audiences through live ramp that reside in the major markets where this festival has historically sold tickets. And they've got 10 years of history of where the majority of the buying occurs. And it's like 10 or 12 city markets or DMAs. And what we were able to do is say, okay, anyone in these locations that went to Jazz Fest in New Orleans or South by Southwest in Austin or the Americana Music Festival in Nashville, we want to hit them with OTT, connected television, mobile display. I mean, just every way that we can hit them. And it's been really interesting to watch over the last week, A, the audience growth, B, the engagement, and C, for the cost. This festival probably would have put, ads in Garden and Gun, and because their target audience is higher income, middle age up kind of audience. And so it's been really interesting to watch that. So using the location, so geofencing or putting a blueprint around all the major concert video or venues in Atlanta is great, but then being able to double down with those third-party audiences and that segmentation is huge. And so that's been really fun to do. That's just one that's been top of mind, Rachel, because we've just been working on it. But that's an example of using it beyond just the location, but maybe through segmentation and audiences as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, the goal is to get your right message in front of the right audience. And there can be a number of ways to do that. If it's recruitment and it's targeting somebody that's at a specific location that they're currently working at and they're hating their job and they want a new job, or if it's targeting audiences that have attended events for the past 10 years, whatever that might be. To Kim's point, I think ultimately it should be the goal should be the same for the most part across all industries. It's just getting the right message in front of the right person at the right time. And kind of what tools you're utilizing to do that. So that kind of nicely leads us into the next question. So we've talked about what we're doing and what we're recommending to our clients for a recession that we're heading into. We all know with instability comes some cautious behavior. Despite holiday spending expected to rise with about 4 to 6% year over year, brands, we're hearing about it. We're seeing it in the news. Brands are bracing themselves for consumer spending to drop in 2023. So are there any changes that you're recommending to your clients in 2023 compared to 2022, whether that's a tool that you're utilizing, different creatives that you're revamping, anything that you guys are kind of recommending or talking to your clients about that maybe you weren't having those same conversations when you were planning for 2022?
I've got a good one. I don't want to dive in just yet. I tend to be a little aggressive. Kim, Athena?
I don't think it's a specific tool necessarily we're recommending, but we certainly are fielding right now, I think, from my book anyway, right, from my list of clients, I'm getting both sides of the more conservative enterprise companies that are thinking about really focusing their budgets down to lower funnel, which can be, that is a gamble, really, right? So about where you come out in the market share, Brandon, right back to your point, at the end of this, right? So we want to make sure, and who knows exactly how it's going to go anyway, right? Agile, nimble, we always have to be able to react anyway. And then I have a lot of my clients that are flipping that a little bit, which is adjusting their KPI thresholds. They understand it's going to cost them more to play, and depending on where they're playing, right? So I think what we've seen even, in the last 6 months is a hyper focus on political spending being the highest it's ever been, ever. and that impacting our CPCs and CPMs, and seeing our clients, their costs on the rise and still sticking with it. We're just seeing an adjustment sometimes with those KPI thresholds. They have to be more comfortable in order to invest now to win later. Again, Brandon, I really felt your pillars today.
Yeah, me too. One thing that, Brandon mentioned were kind of components of getting more for less. At our company, we call that pouring water on the soup, to get more people to the dinner table. One thing that we're noticing, kind of two quick examples. One is it's really hard to know economically what's going to happen when unemployment is still low, and Black Friday and Cyber Monday spending were exponentially higher than projected. Even while we actually wrote a piece on this on our website on Trilio.com about REI just bailing on Black Friday and saying, you know what, we're going to opt outside. We're going to send our people, our family, our work family outside with their families, with their friends to do things on that holiday and not grind it out 18 hours on a location floor. And even with that, it created all kinds of positive e-commerce opportunities for them, because it was a story, Brandon, to your point, that the consumer could feel. And so we thought that was really interesting. One other long-term thing, though, not long-term, but 24 months kind of looking out in building products. The housing market, like we're talking about, has softened. There is more inventory. That market is changing. But, it's like we're telling and we dealt in building products for many years. So we kind of have a little bit of a history that dates back to 2008 and 2009, where it really got dicey. And one thing that we're having to remind our clients is that, and it's a mutual conversation, they know it, is that when a product is specified today for a commercial application, it may not be needed for 18 to 24 to 36 months if it's exterior cladding or a roofing product. But that product is being specified in a set of architectural plans by a designer, architect, or specifier, like right now. So being concerned about the housing market could make you lose far more than 15% market share, because the long-term value of those that are going to continue to put their message out there, but tweak it for the commercial application. And that comes down to how they target, what they say, what keywords we're bidding on through SEM, Google Ads, and Bing Ads type campaigns, and all of that. It's really going to make a huge impact, plus or minus, for the brands that continue to push and advertise. Because in 24 months, if it does pivot back into a positive position in the housing market, the ones that continue to work it are going to be the ones that have their products specified in a bunch of commercial applications. And so that's going to be interesting to watch. Our clients are very much aligned with that, but it's there have been some interesting conversations around it for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would say my biggest piece of advice for 2023, not necessarily what tactics to use, but it's to be intentional with your marketing dollars. That's what I'm telling any new customers we have, our current customers. I see a lot, I have a saying that you can't expect a champagne campaign on a Budweiser budget, but a Budweiser budget can still be successful as long as you are intentional with how you're using those dollars. We have a lot of businesses that see the shiny new penny, and people tell them about the newest tactic and the newest thing in digital, and they all want to be a part of it, but you don't have to be a part of it if your audience is not there. So just be intentional with where you're spending the money and how you're spending it and the message that you're putting in front of them. I mean, you don't have to be everywhere just because it's available.
That's a great point. It's just, you got to work with the client ultimately, and like what their budget is and what you can do with it. And if they don't have as much as you might hope, you can still do stuff with it. Doesn't mean that you can't still drive success for them. So we are, again, I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to ask one last question. I want to give everybody a chance to toot their own horn. And just, if you guys can all take turns to just tell us about a success story that you've had this year, whether it's with your agency, specific clients that you're working with, any success story that you're really proud of to end the year in 2022. And Athena, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Okay. I mentioned the big manufacturing company that we work with recruitment. We started with one, and we were successfully able to fulfill their whole need. I think they said they attributed about 2,000 applications to us. And because we had such success there, it's all over the country. So it went to the next location and the next location and the next location. They kept sharing them in meetings. And now I think we have 5 or 7 sites live right now with recruitment efforts all across the United States. So that's been our biggest success story with that. It's funny, with one of the other locations, they told us November is usually their slowest month in receiving applications, and they still received over 100 of them.
So that's awesome. And that's a great example too of like just starting small, and maybe people don't have the budget, or, you know, they need to see that it works before they're willing to invest. But, you know, if you can drive success during the first campaign and show the clients what you guys can do, and then they continue to open it up to further and further opportunities. So that's awesome. Yeah. Kim, what about you?
Yeah, I think one of my more interesting ones is for one of our gaming clients, where we have been, you know, across the US, they have been legalizing online sports betting over the last few years. And so this year they had Louisiana, Kansas, Ohio, Maryland just went last week or the week before. Anyway, the states are coming online, right? And one of the tactics we've been using with our GroundTruth team is to focus in on those online or even mobile sports bettors and bringing them into the actual brick and mortar casinos, which is where they will spend even more. They will make larger wagers. And so I think, you know, our ability to target around the local competition, but also the spikes we're seeing with the online sports bettings as they're going live throughout the US has been able to drive a ton of incremental foot traffic and wagers into brick and mortar. So I think that's one of my more interesting and fun ones that we've done this year.
I love that. And that's a really cool example too of like kind of a dual KPI, like
yep,
is online, and then to,
we want those initial deposits online, but then we want them to get their butts in the casino, right? So yeah, it's been, I geek out on that kind of stuff because it's so like data heavy and data driven, but at the end of the day, like it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool to be able to show the client, hey, we can do this, but we can also do that.
Yep.
And then be happy with that as just the icing on the cake. So awesome. Patrick, we will end it with you. What's a success story that you want to share with us for this year?
Yeah, and I'm going to, forgive me, I keep talking about building products because I've been buried in building products campaigns today. So forgive me for that. I know it's not the sexiest category in marketing and advertising, but it's certainly cool. One of the things that we did November a year ago was we integrated GroundTruth in with programmatic display and paid search for about 3 building products brands that had not leveraged location-based marketing campaigns. And we reevaluated kind of how we tracked everything and what were our indicators of success or KPIs, and ran the campaigns for a year. They're still running, but at the end of that year, we took a look at it. And one of the things that is not common in building products manufacturing is you have the products that are built, you have a marketing department that's promoting them, and then you have a national sales team that goes out and gets those products into distribution warehouses. So building supply products locations, Acme Building Supply or whatever, there's one in every town, if not more, to kind of support the contractors more than some of the big boxes do. So we set up conversion zones for each and every distributor location that we were driving traffic into using GroundTruth. And what we found is we were getting, for a very reasonable cost per 1,000 impressions, or CPM, we were getting a lot of impressions. We were getting a fair amount of clicks, and then we were tracking what happened with those clicks once they were on site. But the one metric that blew our minds that we're talking about a lot right now, we're actually going to do a 2-part blog series on this for, to talk about GroundTruth, is 2 things. Number one, we averaged out in-store visits after an impression to like $7.15, which is mind blowing to the marketing department for our client, which is a parent company that owns a lot of brands of building products. They were like, oh my gosh, there's no billboard we could buy to, translate into a KPI that's that aggressive. The second thing that we were able to do is provide the client the list of distributor locations and the relative number of visits that occurred. And they were able to use that with their sales team to leverage for a more premium in-store retail, setup. So instead of being in the back corner, 3 feet off the ground on a wall to have sample boards for the product, we were, theoretically, they were able to get, standalone columns, like right when you walk in, showcasing their product, because the distributor likes to see when the brand advertises and draws traffic into their physical retail location. So we were really excited about that. And the cool thing about it is we leveraged GroundTruth in a little bit of a non-traditional way, or a product category that may not have been, one that you would just pick at random. So we were really excited about that.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool, unique way to utilize it, and to go to the distributors and say, hey, we're driving visits to your store. So what can you do for us? That kind of opens those conversations. So I love that. That's a great example. Thank you guys so much. Honestly, I wish that we had more time, because I feel like we have so many great questions that we could get to and could go on and on. There are a few questions that I saw come in, so I'm going to read them off and we'll see who those would apply to. So the first one is great insights. Where do you find CTR and VR benchmarks when you're looking to frame up campaigns for new industries? So Stuart, if you're looking for benchmarks specifically relevant to GroundTruth, you can get those from your GroundTruth rep. So whoever it is that you work with directly, whether it's on the platform or managed services or reseller, if you have a GroundTruth rep that you work with directly, you can reach out to them for some benchmarks that they can share. If you don't, then you can email adexpert@groundtruth.com, and we can get you connected with somebody to talk through specific benchmarks that you're looking to see. So hopefully that's helpful. I saw some other questions come through, but it looks like we got them.
Rachel, there was another question regarding just conversion tracking.
Yep, there it is. Okay, so can GroundTruth pixels conversions on external landing pages after they click the display ad? Yes, we can. We can provide conversion tracking pixels that will allow you to see when somebody converts after they leave the original creative that they're served. So that is an option that you can do through GroundTruth as well. Let's see. Last question. So how much do you have to spend on GroundTruth to get a manager at GroundTruth? So there's several ways to work with us at GroundTruth. We have our self-serve platform ads manager, which there's no minimum spend required to have access to the platform. You can set up and run all of your own campaigns, regardless of what budget you have allocated. And then you will be assigned a dedicated account executive regardless. So on the platform team, if you want to get started and you're looking for more of a self-serve option, you can go ahead and create your account in the platform, and then an account rep will reach out to you. If you're looking for more of a managed services option, like when you say a manager at GroundTruth, you want somebody that can essentially help you run all of your campaigns for you. We do have a managed services option. So again, email that email alias. It's adexpert@groundtruth.com. And whichever way that you want to work with GroundTruth, we'll get you connected with the right person and we can take it from there. I think that was all. Oh, so there's questions coming in through Q&A too, it looks like. Okay. So I see that you're mentioning that you haven't heard from anybody. We'll look into that for you for sure, and get you connected with the right person. All right. I haven't seen any other questions come through that we haven't already answered. Just making sure that I haven't missed anything through either the chat or the Q&A function. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining and running this panel with us. Patrick, Kim, Athena. We know that this is a very busy time of the year. We really, really appreciate your insights. I know that everybody that joined this webinar definitely gained a lot from it. So you guys are amazing. We really appreciate it. We hope everybody enjoyed this webinar. If anybody has any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to that email alias, and we will go from there. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, Rachel.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Rachel. Thanks, Brandon.
Bye-bye.